There's a reason that the U.S. has not acted more forcefully here. How difficult is it for the U.S. to take any approach against the Saudis if this actually turns out to be true without weakening that strong relationship that they have, especially against Iran?
Well, I think it's a very good question, but there is an out here, which is in the form of something known as the Global Magnitsky Act, which is that there are sanctions that can be applied to individuals who conducted and are responsible for what appears to be a heinous Saudi crime. We're still waiting, obviously, for even more information, but so far the evidence does not look good, without really challenging or diminishing the fundamentals of the U.S. Saudi relationship, which goes back to the 1930s and is in many ways essential at this point in the regional contest with Iran. So there is a way to punish individuals, to, I think, more forcefully denounce the Saudis if it looks like what has happened is indeed, that we get the full evidence that the Saudis did this, without straining, an alliance that is in both countries' interests. But it has to be very clear that the Saudis cannot think that they got away with this with a slap on the wrist, because if they do, then we've effectively given up control of that alliance, and the Saudis will believe they can get away with anything.
Eli, you mentioned the Magnitsky Act, and that, of course, would mean that the administration has 120 days to reply back to the Senate with regards to what is happening. The president, though, for his part, appears reluctant, Eli, to do anything about this, particularly the $110 billion worth of arms deal. He said earlier this week that he's reluctant to take anything off the table with that. But Republicans in Congress, they have a different outlook. And in fact, earlier this week, I interviewed Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and I asked him about this and the U.S. Saudi arms deal. Take a listen to what he told me.
I've been opposed to selling arms to Saudi Arabia, and I've been for voting. Congress is supposed to vote on when we go to war, and basically we're involved in their war. So even before the journalist went missing, I was opposed to arming Saudi Arabia.
And meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham has also said, quote, all indicators point to Saudi Arabia, and if it turns out to be Saudi Arabia, as I've said before, they'll be hell to pay. How does Turkey respond to this?
Turkey is actually looking for a support from United States. I think Turkey knows what happened, unfortunately, and United States needs to step up and help Turkey. Otherwise, Turkey doesn't want to get a big argument with Saudis. That's why U.S. should step up. And as of today, Saudi investigation team came to Turkey, and there will be a joint investigation team to look for this incident, unfortunately. But it seems like Turkey is alone on this case.
Ali, this also comes at a time when today American pastor Andrew Brunson was just freed. That was, of course, the main point of friction between the U.S. and Turkey. Now you have Saudis and the Turks having this huge dispute over the Qatar blockade that started last year. Saudis have been very close to the U.S. Given both situations with the both different cases, could we see a realignment of the different dynamics between these three countries?
I think there are separate issues. I don't think there should be a link between the Saudi case and Pastor Brunson, but
they're linked.
They are linked.
In this geopolitical climate, they're linked.
Right. At the end, of course, Turkey needs to deal with United States and have an open dialogue to solve these issues. I'm glad that Pastor Brunson right now is on plane, coming back home. Probably President Trump or Vice President Pence will welcome him at the airport. So it's a good news for reducing the tension between Turkey and U.S. But for the Saudi case, there's a lot of questions that needs to be identified.
And Eli, let me bring this back to you, because on the issue of just how much the U.S. is spending and making a business deal with the Saudis, this was the first country that President Trump visited when he was elected to office. Not Canada, not Mexico, not the U.K., but Saudi Arabia. This was a pinnacle of the Jared Kushner foreign policy relationship with the Saudis, $110 billion. Is the president, while maybe being inartful in his articulation of saying that it would be difficult to stop this arms deal, is he wrong? Would U.S. businesses with the supply chains, 25 days until the midterms, be impacted if their bottom lines are impacted and funds are cut off to the Saudis?
Well, I mean, the president could easily say, I'm going to suspend an arms sale until I get a full accounting from the Saudis as a means to just get to pressure them to come clean without necessarily disrupting the supply chain and doing all of that. I should say the increased arms sale of advanced weapons to Saudi Arabia really began in the second term of the George W. Bush administration. This used to be somewhat controversial. The Israelis have dropped their objections kind of more than 10 years ago on this because of the shifting regional alliances against the Iranians. And Obama, even though he was critical at times of the Saudis and tried to reach a nuclear agreement in part with the Iranians, he too continued those arms sales. So that's been a bipartisan approach that's been good for the U.S. defense industry. And, from a purely military perspective, one does have to wonder, exactly if the Saudis have the capability to kind of, an indigenous forces to use this equipment effectively without U.S. help and U.S. spare parts and things like that. But regardless, this has been something that's been going on for a while. There are plenty of things that you can do short of ending the arms sales, as Senator Rand Paul says, that would send a message to the Saudis, punish them, and hopefully deter them from ever trying anything like this again.